We're gonna continue loud reading. Before leaving with Tuk, I went down to the Matrix Paddy's to say goodbye to Sempha. She said little, but I could see in her eyes that she was sad to see me go. Without premeditation, I blessed her and then kissed her on the forehead. Tuk stood nearby, smiling and bobbing. Then we were off, leading the two packbeards, Superior Orlandi Supervisor Orlandi came to the end of the road and waved as we entered the narrow lane hacked into the aureate foliage. Domain, dirigenos. After a week on the trail. What trail? After a week in the trackless yellow rainforest, after a week of exhausting climb up the ever-stepper shoulder of the Pinyon Plateau, we emerged this morning into a rocky outcropping that allowed us a view back across an expanse of jungle toward the Big and the Middle Sea. The plateau here is almost 3,000 meters above sea level, and the view was impressive. Heavy rain clouds spread out below us to the foot of the Pinyon Hills. But through gaps in the white and grey carpet of clouds, we caught glimpse of the Can in its leisurely ongoing towards Port Eyre. At the sea, chrome-yellow swatches of the forest we had struggled through, and a hint of Magneta far to the east that Tuk swore was the lower matrix of fiberplastic fields near Porisibo. We continued onward and upward late into the evening. Tuk is obviously worried that we will be caught in the flame forest when the Tesla trees become active. I struggle to keep up, tugging at the heavy-laden beard and saying silent prayers to keep me mind of my aches, pains and general misgivings. Day 83. Loaded and moved before dawn today. The air smells of smoke and ashes. The change in vegetation here on the plateau is startling. No longer evident are the ubiquitous weirdwood and leafy chalma. After passing through an intermediate zone of short evergreens and everblues, then after climbing again through dense strength of mutated logpole pines and trispan, we came into the flame forest propped with the groves of tall Prometheus, trailer, even presence phoenix, and round star stands of ember labans. What's labans? Laband. Glowing, gleaming, flickering with a soft radiance. Lambient. Oh yeah, lambient. This is the I assume, lambient light of the city, right? Lambience. Occasionally we encountered impenetrable breaks of the white fibrous bifurcated bistus plants that took picturesquely referred to as looking like the rotting cocks of some dead giants. What be buried shallow here, that be sure. Looking like the rotting cocks of some dead giants that will be buried shallow here, that be sure. My guide has a way with words. It was late afternoon before we saw our first Tesla tree. For half an hour we had been struggling over an ash-covered forest floor, trying not to tread on the tender shots of phoenix and firewhip gamely pushing up through the sooty soil, when suddenly Tusk stopped and pointed. The Tesla tree, still half a kilometer away, stood at least 100 meters tall, half again as high as the tallest Prometheus. Near its crown, it bulged with the distinctive onion-shaped dome of its accumulator gall. The radial branches above the gall trailed dozens of nimbus vines, each looking silver and metallic against the clear green and lapis sky. The whole wing made me think of some elegant high Muslim mosque on New Mecca, irreverently garlanded with tinsel. We got to get the birds and our asses the hell out of here, grunted Took. He insisted that we change into Flame Forest gear right then and there. We spent the rest of the afternoon and evening trudging on in our osmosis mask and thick rubber-soled boots, swearing under lace of leathery gamma cloth. Both of the birds acted nervous, their long ears pricked at the slightest sound. Even through my mask I could smell the ozone. It reminded me of electric trains I had played with a child on lazy Christmas afternoon in a village franchise, Sur la Saona. We are camping as close as we can to a Bestos break this night. Took showed me how to set out the ring of Arestos rods, at the time clacking dire warnings to himself and searching the evening sky for clouds. I planned to sleep well in spite of everything. Day 84. Sweet Mother of Christ, for 3 hours we have been caught up in the middle of the end of the world. The explosion started shortly after midnight, mere lightning crashes at first, and again our better judgment took and I set our head through the tent flap to watch the pyrotechnics. I am used to the Matthew Mouth monsoon storm on Pissim, so the first hour of lightning displays did not seem too unusual. Only the sight of distant Tesla trees as the unerring focus of the aerial discharge was a bit unnerving. But soon the forest behemoths were glowing and spitting with their own accumulated energy, and then, just as I was drifting off to sleep despite the continued noise, true Armageddon was unleashed. At least 100 arcs of electricity must have been released in the first 10 seconds of Tesla tree's opening spasm of violent energy. A Prometheus less than 30 meters from us exploded, dropping flaming brands 50 meters to the forest floor. The arrestor rods glowed, hissed. Make a sharp, sibilant sound as of the letter, the escaping Wesley hissing. Alright, in that way. Glowed, hissed, and defected arc after arc of blue-white death over and around our small campsite. Took skimmed something, but no mere human sound was audible over the onslaught of light and noise. A patch of trailing phoenix burst into flame near the tethered birds and of the terrified animals, hobbled and blindfolded as it was broke free and lunged through the circle of glowing arrested rods. Instantly 6 bolts of lightning from the nearest Tesla arced to the helpless animal. For a mad second I could have sworn I saw the beast's skeleton glowing through boiling flesh, and then it spasmed high into the air and simply ceased to be. Ceased to be. Ceased? Simply ceased to be. For 3 hours we have watched the end of the world. 2 of the arrestor rods have fallen, but the other 8 continue to function. Tuk and I huddle in the hot cave of our tent. Osmosis masks filtering enough cool oxygen out of the superheated smoky air to allow us to breathe. Only the lack of undergrowth and tax skill in placing our tent away from other targets and near the sheltering bestose plants have allowed us to survive. That and the 8 whiskled alloy rods that stand between us and eternity. They seem to holding up well. I shot to task over the hiss and crackle, crash and spit of the storm. They be made to stand be hour, maybe 2. Guns my guide. Any time, maybe sooner. They fuse, we die. I nod and sip at lukewarm water through the slip seat of my osmosis mask. If I survive this night, I shall always thank God for his generosity in allowing me to see this sight. Day 87. Tuk and I emerged from the smoldering northeast edge of the flame forest at noon yesterday, promptly set up camp by the edge of the small stream, and slept for 18 hours straight, making up for 3 nights of no sleep and 2 grueling days moving without rest through a nightmare of flame and ash. Everywhere we looked as we approached the Hodgeback Ridge, the terminus of the forest, we could see seed pods and cones burns open with new life for the various fire species that had died in the conflagration of the previous 2 nights. 5 of our arrestor rods still functioned, although neither Tuk nor I was urged to test them another night. Our surviving pack breed collapsed and died in its stand. The heavy load was lifted off its back. I awoke this morning at dawn to the sound of the running water. I followed the small stream a kilometer to the northeast, following a deepening in its sound, until suddenly it dropped from sight. The cleft. I had almost forgotten our destination. This morning, stumbling through the fog, loping from one wet rock to another alongside the widening stream, I took a leap to a final boulder, threatened there, regained my balance, and looked straight down above a waterfall that dropped almost 3,000 meters to mist, rock, river far below. The cleft was not carved out of the rising plateau, and was the legendary Grand Canyon, an old earth or world crack of Hyperion. In spite of its active oceans and seemingly Earth-like containments, Hyperion is technically quite dead, more like Mars, Lucis, and Armagast, in its total lack of continental drift. And like Mars and Lucis, Hyperion is afflicted with its deep ice ages, although here, periodically, is spread to 37 million years by the long ellipse of the currently absent binary dwarf. The Comlog compares the cleft to the pre-terraformed Mariner Valley of Mars, both being caused by the weakening of crust through periodic freeze and thaw over the eons, followed by the flow of subterranean rivers such as the Cans. Then the massive collapse, running like a long scar through the mountainous wing of the continent Aquila. Tuk joined me as I stood on the edge of the cleft. I was naked, rising the ash smell from my traveling clothes and cassock. I splashed cold water over my pale flesh and lunged out loud as the echoes of Tuk's Shouts came back from the north wall 2/3 of kilometer away. Because of the nature of the crust collapse, Took and I stood far out on overhang that hid the south wall below us. Although previously exposed, we assumed that the rocky cornice, which had defied gravity for millions of years, would last a few more hours as we bathed, relaxed, shouted echoing hollows until we were hoarse, and generally acted like children liberated from school. Took confessed that he had never penetrated the full width of the flame forest, nor known anyone who had in this season, and announced that now that the Tesla trees were becoming fully active, he would have at least a 3-month wait until he could return. He did not seem too sorry, and I was glad to have him with me. In the afternoon we transported my gear in relays, setting up camp near the stream 100 meters back from the cornice and stacking my flow foam boxes of scientific gear for further sorting in the morning. It was cold this evening after dinner, just before sunset. I pulled on my thermal jacket and walked alone to a rocky ledge southwest of where I had first encountered the cleft. From my vantage point far out over the river, the view was memorable. Mist rose from unseen waterfalls, tumbling to the river far below. Spray rising in shifting curtains of mist and multiplied the setting sun into a dozen violet spheres and twice that many rainbows. I watched as many spectrums was born, rose towards the darkening dome of sky and dies. As the cooling air settled into the cracks and caverns of the plateau, and the warm air rushed skywards, pulling leaves, twigs, and mist upward in the vertical gale, a sound abed up out of the cleft, as if the continent itself was calling with the voices of stone giants, gigantic bamboo flutes, church organs the size of palaces, the clear, perfect notes ranging from the shyless soprano to the deepest bass. I speculated on wind vectors against the fluid rock walls, on caverns far below, venting deep cracks in the motionless crust, and on the illusion of human voices that random harmonics can generate. But in the end I set aside speculation and simply listened as the cleft sang its farewell hymn to the sun. I walked back to our tent, and its circle of bioluminescence lantern light at the first fusillade of meteor showers burned the skies overhead, and distant explosions from the flame forest ripped along the southern and western horizons like cannon fire from some ancient war of pre-Hegira old Earth. Once in the tent, I tried the long-range comlog bands, but there is nothing but static. I suspect that even in the primitive comsats that served the fiberplastic plantations were ever to broadcast this far east, anything but the tallest laser or fatline beams would be masked by the mountains and Tesla activity. On Paysem, few of us at the monastery wore or carried personal camlog, but the datasphere was always there if we need to tap into it. Here there is no choice. I sit and listen to the last notes from the canyon wind die, watch the skies simultaneously darken and blaze, smile at the sound of Took snoring from his bedroll outside the tent, and I think to myself, if this is exile, so be it. Day 88. Took is dead, murdered. I found his body when I left the tent at sunrise. He had been sleeping outside, not more than 4 meters from me. He had said that he wished to sleep under the stars. The murderers cut his throat while he slept. I heard no cry. I did dream, however, dreams of some famine steering to me during my fever, dreams of cool hands touching my neck and chest, touching the crucifix I have worn since childhood. I stood over Tuk's body, staring at the wide, dark circle where his blood soaked into Hyperion's uncaring soil, and I shivered at the thought that the dream had been more than a dream, that hand that touched me in the night. I confess that I acted more like a frightened old fool than a priest. I did administer extreme unction, but there the panic struck me and I left my poor guide's body, desperately searched through the supplies for a weapon and took away the machete I had used in the rainforest and the low-voltage macer with which I had planned to hunt small game. Whether I would have used a weapon on a human being, even to save my own life, I don't know. But in my panic, I carried the machete, the macer, and the powered binoculars to a high boulder near the cleft and searched the region for any signs of the murderers. Nothing stirred except the tiny arboreals and nothing abnormals and gossamers we had seen flitting through the trees yesterday. The forest itself seemed abnormally thick and dark. The cleft offered 100 terraces, ledges, and rock balconies to the northeast for entire bands of savages. An army could have hidden there in the cracks and even present mists. After 30 minutes of fruitless vigilance and full cowardice, I returned to the campsite and prepared Tuk's body for a burial. It took me well over 2 hours to dig a proper grave in the rocky soil of the plateau. When it was filled and the formal service was finished, I could think of nothing personal to say about the rough, funny little man who had been my guide. Watch over him, Lord, I said at least, disgust at my own hypocrisy, sure in my heart that I was mountaining words only to myself. Give him safe passage. Amen. This evening I have moved my camp half a kilometer north. My tent is pitched in an open area 10 meters away, but I am wedged with my back against the boulder, sleeping robes pulled around, the machete and macer nearby. After Tuk's funeral, I went through the supplies and boxes of equipment. Nothing had been taken except for the few remaining arrestor rods. Immediately, I wondered if someone had followed us through the flame forest in order to kill Tuk and strand me here. But I could think of no motive for such an elaborate action. Anyone from the plantations could have killed us. We slept in the rainforest, or better yet, from a murderer's point of view, deep in the flame forest where no one would wonder at 2 charred corpses. That left the Bikura, my primitive charges. I considered returning through the flame forest without the rods, but soon abandoned the idea. It is probable death to stay and certain death to go. 3 months before the Teslas became dormant, 120 of the 26th local days, an eternity. Dear Christ, why has this come to me? And why I was spared last night if I'm merely to be offered up this night or next? I sit here under the darkening crag and I listen to the suddenly ominous meaning rising with the night wind from the cleft, and I pray to the sky light from the blood-red sticks of meteor trails, mounting worlds to my save. Day 95. The terrors of the past week have largely abated. I found that even fear fades and becomes commonplace after days of anticimax. I used the machete to cut small trees for a lean-to, covering the roof and side with grama cloth and coughing between the logs with mud. The back walls is the solid stone of the boulder. I have sorted through my research gear and set some of it out, although I suspect that I will never use it now. I have begun foraging to supplement my quickly diminishing cage of freeze-dried food. By now, according to the absurd schedule drawn up so long ago on Paysem, I was to have been living with the Bikura for some weeks and trading small goods for local food. No matter, besides my diet of blunt but easily boiled chama roots, I have found half a dozen varieties of berries and larger fruits that the Comolog assures me are edible. So far only one has disagreed with me enough to keep me squatting all night near the edge of the nearest ravine. Probably that means just shitting. I pace the confidence of the region as restlessly as one of those caged polyps that were so prized by the minor padishas on Armagast. A kilometer to the south and 4 to the west, the flame forests are in full form. In the morning, smoke vies with the shifting curtains of mist to hide the sky. Only the near-solid breaks of Bestos, the rocky soil here on the summit plateau, and the hodgeback. Only the near-solid rocks of Bestos, the rocky soil of the summit plateau, and the hedgehog rides running like armor-plated vertebrae northeast from here keep the Teslas at bay. To the north, the plateau widens out and the undergrowth becomes denser near the cleft for some 15 kilometers until the way is blocked by the ravine, a third as deep and half as wide as the cleft itself. Yesterday I reached this northernmost point and start across the gaping barrier with some frustration. I will try again someday, returning to the east to find a crossing point, but from the telltale sign of phoenix across the chasm and the pall of smoke along the northeastern horizon, I suspect I will find only the Chalma-filled canyons and steppes of flame forest that are wrought in on the orbital survey map I carry. Tonight I visited Tuk's rocky grave as the evening wind began to wail its alien dirge. I knelt there and tried to pray, but nothing came. Edogard, nothing came. I am as empty as those fake sarcophagi that you and I underrated dead, and I unearthed by the score from the sterile desert sand near Tatumbel Vadi. The Zen Gnostic would say that this emptiness is a good sign, that it presages openness to a new level of awareness, new insights, new experience. Merge. My emptiness is only emptiness. Day 96. I'm gonna read it later.